picture the Situation Room during a global crisis. Like, dark suits, tense faces, secure phone lines.
Oh, absolutely. That's the classic movie image.
Exactly. It's the image we immediately associate with, high-stakes diplomacy and rapid-fire decisions. But today, Monday, April 27, 2026, the primary tool being used to diffuse a massive geopolitical standoff between two historic allies is, well, it's not a secure phone line.
No, it's definitely not. It's actually a 21-gun salute, a horse-drawn carriage, and a perfectly timed cup of tea.
Right. Which is just wild to think about.
It's a striking contrast. I mean, we're so conditioned to think that resolving international friction requires, sweat on the brow and really aggressive negotiation tactics.
Yeah, people shouting across a table.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what we're seeing today is the deployment of a completely different strategic weapon.
Yeah.
It looked like pure archaic pageantry, but it's actually performing incredibly heavy diplomatic lifting.
And that is exactly what this deep dive is all about. We've pulled together a massive stack of sources for you today. Official itineraries, historical analyses, international news reports.
Lots of really fascinating on-the-ground details.
Yeah, so much detail. And it's all covering the historic 4-day state visit of the British King and Queen to Washington, D.C.
Which is a huge deal, by the way.
Yeah.
This is the first state visit by a British monarch since Queen Elizabeth II was hosted way back in 2007.
Wow, 2007.
Yeah, and it's King Charles III's very first visit to the U.S. since he took the throne in 2022.
So our mission for you today is to look right past the velvet ropes and the military bands. We're going to explore how the sheer force of, well, ceremony is deliberately engineered to manage very real, very modern geopolitical crises. Okay, let's unpack this.
To really understand the strategy at play this week, we have to look closely at the narrative that this whole itinerary is trying to build.
Right.
And we really have to start by acknowledging the staggering historical irony hanging over this entire trip. The timing here, it is definitely no accident.
The timing is almost cinematic, honestly. I mean, this state visit was specifically scheduled to coincide with the early celebrations for the 250th anniversary of the United States declaring independence.
Right, independence.
And we are celebrating independence from Britain, but more specifically from King Charles's direct ancestor, King George III.
It's incredible having the current British monarch arrive in Washington to reaffirm an alliance with a republic that was literally born from a violent revolt against his own family. It's a remarkable piece of full-circle diplomacy.
It really is. And the scale of how both nations are choosing to mark this alliance, it's just immense. Like tomorrow, Tuesday, April 28, there is a massive state arrival ceremony planned for the South Lawn of the White House.
Yeah, the sources detail a level of military honors that are just clearly designed to project absolute unified strength to the rest of the world.
Oh, totally.
There will be the U.S. Army Herald trumpets, a full 21-gun salute by the Presidential Salute Battery, and this historic pass and review.
That pass and review is intense. It involves 300 U.S. service members, with nearly 500 personnel from all 6 branches of the armed forces present out there on the lawn.
Which is a historic first for a state visit, right?
Yeah, a historic first. They are projecting this massive, booming military scale, but the itinerary is fascinating because it immediately pivots from that overwhelming display of hard power to these incredibly quiet, intimate, and highly personal moments.
Right, the contrast is really sharp.
Very sharp. For example, right after that massive military display, King Charles and Queen Camilla will have a private tea in the green room with President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump.
Just a quiet cup of tea.
Just a quiet cup of tea. And then they're doing something completely unexpected. They're touring a new White House beehive.
I love this detail. The beehive on the South Lawn is just a brilliant diplomatic move.
Yeah.
The First Lady recently had this hive installed, and it's expected to produce about 30 pounds of honey annually.
Which is a lot of honey.
It is. And King Charles is an avid, super passionate beekeeper. He personally manages several hives at his residence back in the UK.
It honestly makes me think of attending a massive, ultra-formal corporate merger where the stakes are billions of dollars, but the two CEOs decide to break the ice by geeking out over their shared backyard gardening hobby.
That's a perfect analogy.
Right.
And Queen Camilla has her own highly targeted personal events, too.
Oh, right, the New York trip.
Yeah, on Wednesday, they traveled to New York City, where she's attending a literacy event to celebrate the 100th birthday of Winnie the Pooh.
That's so specific.
It is. She's donating a specially made Roo toy to the New York Public Library to basically complete their collection of the original stuffed animals.
I see, but that stuffed kangaroo is not just a cute photo opportunity.
No, not at all. It's a highly calculated diplomatic gesture, just like the king visiting the beehive or their planned visit to the 9/11 memorial ahead of the upcoming 25th anniversary of those attacks.
Right.
Or even their trip to Virginia to meet with indigenous communities. These soft human moments, they're engineered to create a powerful emotional buffer.
Because when the geopolitical landscape is tense, reminding the public of shared humanity, shared grief, and shared culture creates a sort of foundation of goodwill, right? It makes open hostility much harder to sustain.
Exactly. And a buffer is desperately needed right now. I mean, the irony is that while the monarchy projects this aura of total control and historical stability, the actual geopolitical reality they're walking into is incredibly fractured.
Oh, it's a mess. There are significant political landmines everywhere you look in the sources, and this visit is actively trying to smooth them all over. Now, to be clear, we're just reporting what's in the sources here, but the friction is very real.
Very real. The current state of U.S. and U.K. relations is honestly characterized by major friction. We look at the strategic and military side. A lot of the tension centers around the ongoing Iran war.
Right.
Our sources outline that President Trump has publicly criticized UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer for maintaining a pretty passive stance on military support.
Yeah, to put the mechanics of that disagreement into perspective for you, we're talking specifically about the Strait of Hormuz.
A very critical area.
Incredibly critical. It's a global choke point between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman, where roughly a fifth of the world's entire oil consumption passes through.
Wow.
Yeah. President Trump is seeking robust allied support for a military operation to forcibly keep that strait open and project power.
Right.
But Prime Minister Starmer has explicitly stated that escalating the war is against the immediate interests of the UK, and he's refused to join the operation.
That is a massive rift between two nations that are historically lockstep military allies.
Massive.
And that strategic disagreement is compounding existing economic and territorial disputes, too. I mean, the economic friction is largely driven by the UK's implementation of a digital services tax.
Right, which is a tax that essentially targets the revenues of search engines, social media platforms, and like massive online marketplaces.
Yeah.
And because those platforms are overwhelmingly massive American tech companies, from the U.S. perspective, this tax functions as a targeted penalty on American innovation.
Precisely. And the U.S. response is where the economic threat becomes very real. The U.S. has threatened retaliatory tariffs on British exports.
Wow.
So yeah, a dispute over how to tax Silicon Valley suddenly threatens the livelihood of British manufacturers.
And it's all connected.
It is. And if that weren't enough, the U.S. is reportedly reconsidering its longstanding support for the UK's territorial claim over the Falkland Islands in the South Atlantic.
The Falklands. I mean, that is a deeply sensitive issue for the UK, going all the way back to the 1982 war.
Very sensitive.
While the U.S. has historically maintained official neutrality on the ultimate sovereignty of the islands, they have always recognized the UK's administration of them. So pulling back that recognition now would be a severe sinological and diplomatic blow to Britain.
Absolutely. These are fundamental, foundational cracks in the alliance.
So with that level of volatility, it completely explains why the logistics of this royal visit are being handled with extreme, almost paranoid caution.
Oh, paranoid is the right word.
Yeah.
British officials specifically requested that Tuesday's bilateral meeting in the Oval Office between the king and the president be held strictly behind closed doors.
They don't want any cameras in there.
None. They are highly aware of past incidents where President Trump utilized the presence of the global media to publicly pressure foreign leaders, his past interactions with the Ukrainian president.
Right.
They want to completely eliminate the possibility of unscripted remarks on the Iran war or digital tariffs being caught on camera.
See, looking at all these heavy disputes, the Strait of Hormuz, tariffs on exports, the sovereignty of the Falklands, it forces a really serious question about the premise of this entire visit.
How so?
Well, King Charles is a constitutional monarch. He has absolutely zero political power to change any of these policies. He can't deploy a single British ship to the Persian Gulf, and he certainly can't repeal a tax.
That's true, he can't.
So I have to wonder, is his presence here just an elaborate distraction? Or is there a tangible mechanism where sending a monarch across the Atlantic actually solves something?
It's a great question. But it's not a distraction. It's a change in the environment. International relations professor Salvador Santino Regiome describes this exact dynamic as crisis management through ceremony.
Crisis management through ceremony.
Yes. When relations between elected, politically constrained leaders become volatile, the monarchy steps in to provide what Regium calls a second diplomatic language.
A second diplomatic language, meaning like a language of continuity, restraint, and historical intimacy, rather than just barking policy demands.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Charles cannot change the policy, no. But his presence creates this highly visible, overwhelmingly prestigious setting that forces both nations to step back from the brink.
Right.
It allows leaders to engage in a grand display of unity without appearing weak to their respective political bases. It acts as a pressure release valve. You can't easily shout about tariffs or military deployments when you're standing next to a king planting a memorial tree or admiring a beehive.
You literally can't. It essentially forces everyone to put on their best manners.
Precisely.
Which is such an interesting psychological mechanism, especially given the actual physical realities on the ground in Washington, D.C. right now, because the pressure isn't just diplomatic, it's immediate, it's physical, and it's highly unpredictable.
Yeah, the security environment for this visit is described by our sources as completely unprecedented.
Completely. There is a very heavy shadow hanging over the Capitol.
Yeah.
Just this past Saturday night, there was a shooting incident at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
Right.
So the city is already on incredibly high alert, and the British ambassador to the U.S. noted that while they are confident in the security measures, adjustments are constantly being made.
And you have to add to that the very real possibility of large-scale protests. The sources highlight this No Kings protest movement, which is primarily directed at President Trump. But experts warn that having a literal British monarch in town could act as a lightning rod.
Oh, absolutely.
It could give that movement massive momentum in the streets.
It's such a volatile mix. You have recent violence, a highly militarized security posture, and a protest movement focused on anti-authoritarian themes, all converging while the city hosts the ultimate global symbol of inherited power.
Right.
The potential for something to go wrong, for an image of chaos to be broadcast globally, is immense.
Which is exactly what makes the strict, almost obsessive protocol of the royal visit make complete sense. It's not just about tradition, it's about risk mitigation.
Right, reducing the variables.
Exactly. The sources noted that even the initial handshake between President Trump and King Charles upon arrival was heavily scrutinized.
Oh, I read about that.
Yeah, it lasted exactly 8 seconds, with both men subtly pulling each other's hands toward themselves. When the environment outside is a powder keg, every unscripted second is a liability.
Protocol removes those variables, and that drive to eliminate variables extends into areas you might not even expect.
Like the dinner plate.
Yes. The logistical details from former royal chef Darren McGrady regarding the state dinner menus are just fascinating. The dietary rules are incredibly strict. Like, there is absolutely no garlic allowed in any dish, ever.
No garlic at all.
None. And the mechanism behind that is super simple: to prevent bad breath during the incredibly close, whispered conversations that happen at these diplomatic dinners.
Which is highly practical when you're speaking inches from another world leader's face.
Very practical. There's also a strict ban on shellfish, because the risk of food poisoning derailing a foreign visit is just too high a variable to accept.
Makes sense.
And there is absolutely no foie gras, which aligns with the king's personal, ethical, and environmental principles. Instead, the menu is heavily curated around what he loves: cheese, honey, and an apparent obsession with organic mint peas and lamb.
Organic mint peas.
Yep. Queen Camilla, meanwhile, loves chocolate.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting, though. How do you balance the absurdity of agonizing over whether to serve organic mint peas when there are literal security threats and protests happening right outside the gates?
I know, it sounds crazy, but this rigidity is the very purpose of the monarchy in this setting. As historian Justin Voff points out in our sources, unscripted means unpredictable, and unpredictable can get ugly.
Wow.
Yeah, I see the underlying logic now. It acts as a diplomatic straitjacket.
A straitjacket, yeah.
Think about it. If you take two world leaders who are currently engaged in a bitter dispute over digital taxes and military support, and you put them in a room where they can dictate the terms, things might escalate.
They definitely might.
But if you put them at a table where every single fork placement, every 8-second handshake, and every menu item has been dictated by a 1,000-year-old institution, you strip them of their ability to dominate the room.
That's a great point.
The protocol forces them to behave. The organic mint peas are literally a mechanism of control.
That is a perfect way to synthesize it. The protocol strips away the home court advantage of any politician. When the world outside feels chaotic and dangerous, the absolute unwavering strictness of the protocol inside projects an aura of enduring order.
And this playbook of using the monarchy to project stability and reshape American public perception, it's not new. This visit is just the latest chapter in a century of royal visits to America.
History is the currency the monarchy deals in, right? And King Charles is about to spend a significant amount of it tomorrow when he addresses a joint meeting of Congress.
Which is incredibly rare. House Speaker Mike Johnson referred to the address as a distinct honor. King Charles will be only the second British monarch in history to address Congress.
Second ever.
Yeah. The only other time this happened was over 3 decades ago, when his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, addressed Congress in 1991.
And that speech is mostly remembered for a very specific, slightly embarrassing mechanical failure.
Oh, the famous talking hat incident.
Yes. The lectern was not adjusted to account for the Queen's height before she began speaking. As a result, all the audience and the television cameras could see was her purple hat bobbing up and down behind the microphones.
She handled it so brilliantly a few days later, though. She opened her next speech by saying, "I do hope you can see me today," which just completely won over the American public.
It did. But it highlights how these moments become indelible parts of our cultural memory. Our sources are full of these historical echoes.
Oh yeah, like if you look back to the very first official state visit by reigning British monarchs in 1939, King George VI and Queen Elizabeth visited President Franklin D. Roosevelt. This was right on the precipice of World War II.
Right, the stakes could not have been higher.
Exactly. And the most vital mechanism of that entire 1939 trip was not a treaty negotiation. It was a picnic in Hyde Park where the king ate a hot dog.
The famous hot dog diplomacy.
Yes. President Roosevelt knew that the American public was deeply isolationist at the time and super suspicious of British imperial motives. Having the King of England eat a staple of working-class American food humanized the monarchy overnight.
It's brilliant PR.
It transformed the British from distant aristocrats into relatable allies that the American public might actually want to help defend against Nazi Germany.
It really was a masterclass in utilizing soft power for national survival. And we see the same dynamic in 1976 when Queen Elizabeth returned to celebrate the bicentennial with President Gerald Ford basically navigating the complexities of post-Watergate America.
Right.
Or even in 1985 when Prince Charles and Princess Diana visited Ronald Reagan and Diana famously danced with John Travolta in the Cross Hall.
The royals are essentially diplomatic time capsules for the United States. Presidents change, political parties flip, and foreign policies completely reverse course. But the British monarchy is the one constant yardstick we use to measure different eras of our own history.
That is exactly why the events of this week matter so much for the long term. Decades from now, the general public is not going to remember the intricate nuances of the digital services tax disputes.
Definitely not.
And the specific friction points over the Strait of Hormuz from this particular month. They'll just fade into academic footnotes.
What they will remember is the imagery. They will remember the 250th anniversary block party. They'll remember Queen Camilla handing a stuffed Winnie the Pooh to a librarian. They'll remember a king and a president looking at a beehive. In the realm of soft power, the pageantry does not just distract from the history. The pageantry literally becomes the history.
Well said.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? It means that over the next few days, as you see the footage of the 300 troops on the South Lawn, or read trivia about the ban on garlic at the state dinner, you're not just watching an outdated, expensive parade.
You are watching a highly sophisticated, deeply calculated tool of international relations actively at work.
Exactly. Try to look past the menus and the military bans. Watch the subtle power dynamics at play. Watch how an 8-second handshake and a rigid protocol are deployed to cool down a geopolitical room that is running dangerously hot.
It is a performance, certainly, but it's a performance executed with the highest possible diplomatic stakes.
It absolutely is. But looking at the historical weight of this visit leaves me with one final provocative thought for you to mull over. We've talked a lot today about how this crisis management through ceremony relies heavily on shared history. You know, the memory of World War II alliances, the echo of 9/11.
Right, those shared touchstones.
But as we move further and further into an era completely dominated by rapid digital communication, artificial intelligence, and hyper-partisan politics, what happens when the generation that inherently reveres these long-standing historical anchors is gone.
That's a profound vulnerability for the institution, honestly. If the audience no longer recognizes the weight of the symbolism, the second diplomatic language loses its translation entirely.
Exactly. Can the ancient institution of the monarchy still serve as an effective diplomatic straitjacket for a future generation? A generation that gets its news in fragmented 5-second digital clips and might not value the nostalgia of an old empire at all?
It's a great question.
It leaves you wondering if we are currently witnessing the absolute peak of this kind of traditional soft power, or if we are watching the beginning of its inevitable end. Because as we have learned today, when you're trying to manage a modern crisis, sometimes a secure phone line is not enough. Sometimes you need a beehive, a strict protocol, and a perfectly timed cup of tea.